Now we are going to our next speaker, who is Austin Cole, who speaks from the belly of the beast, shall we say, and has a lot to contribute, even though he has given me an extremely short bio, which is simply to say that he's a member of the Black Alliance for Peace, Peace's Haiti Americas team, and he's currently a graduate student at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So Austin, please go ahead. We are eager to hear you.
Thank you, Radhika, and thank all the speakers that have come already. Hopefully, my bio is short. Hopefully, my words can speak for themselves as well. It was wonderful to hear from everyone, particularly on all the historical context that everyone has provided, and kind of the current conditions. So I want to depart from that point, and from something that Carlos actually just mentioned around the changes in the current conditions, and talk a little bit as well about Black Alliance for Peace, about BAP's work in Haiti and in the Americas. So I think the question of the Summit of the Americas versus CELAC is an important one right now, particularly because I believe, as Carlos mentioned, although the Democrats in power right now in the U.S. may take a different approach to Latin America and the Caribbean, the goal is the same, of expansion of U.S. imperialism through slightly different tactics. And we see that across a myriad of different ways. So you see the OAS and the OAS-sponsored Summit of the Americas, continued consolidation of both economic and military power there. You see the core group, which has been very active in Haiti in the recent renewal of the UN mandate in Haiti, which is supported by the U.S., strongly supported and run by the U.S. And you'll see the expansion of SOUTHCOM, U.S. Southern Command, in the region, and the militarization, increased militarization in the region. This is something as BAP that we, as an anti-militaristic coalition, that we are very concerned about and doing a lot of work on, and to draw attention to SOUTHCOM. And for those who may not know, the U.S. military divides the world up into different zones. So we talk about AFRICOM, which is obviously the U.S. African Command, which was expanded a lot under Obama, and we've now, in addition, begun to talk a lot about SOUTHCOM, which is growing. And what's important there's a lot to say, but what I'll say first, and kind of the most important areas, is that SOUTHCOM, the U.S. has used sort of the idea of disaster preparedness, the climate crisis, and regional integration in order to increasingly militarize the region. We see this is tied to U.S. war, supported wars in Ukraine, the U.S. war in previous war in Afghanistan, police brutality in the 1033 program in the U.S. at home, and the kind of colonization and the brutalization of African communities in the U.S., as well as the militarization of the region. Right? And so what SOUTHCOM has done is not only expanded its operations, but also tried to consolidate the other countries in the Caribbean Basin in Central America as well, to do things like Operation Trade Winds, which are military exercise that happen throughout the Caribbean every single year, as well as more recent program called Sentinel Watch, which is taking place in Guatemala and Honduras, and is also co-sponsored by USAID. A lot of these things are under the guise of aid programs and, like I said, disaster preparedness, but have the ultimate goal of kind of changing the conditions of neocolonialism or imperialism in the region and increase militarization throughout the region. And one of the hardest things with that, and I think I really appreciated, Arnold, for your kind of historical context here and the importance of understanding mass movement versus any specific leaders, is that, in doing this, the U.S. has brought in partners, particularly the larger countries in the region, Mexico, Brazil, and others, to try to support militarization in the Caribbean and throughout the region, under the guise of security, right, and security forces. And we see that as well with the U.S. With the UN mission in Haiti, and the mission in Haiti and the support of other countries. And we sort of called that out in a letter to AMLO in Mexico last month, to not support the ongoing, neo-colonialization of Haiti that the U.S. has continued to push as a response to, violence in the region. And so we know that while, we support kind of the progressive forces in the region, we also have to watch that the way that the U.S. is trying to, mold things in the future, and an adaptation of the Monroe Doctrine is to kind of bring in junior partners into imperialism throughout the region, right? And to join in that, particularly in the Caribbean. And I really, really thank Camila for the bringing the Caribbean into this space, because I think as we talk about human rights and the importance of human rights at the Black Alliance for Peace, we talk about people-centered human rights, right, which are defined as emanating from bottom-up mass struggle, informed by a Black revolutionary and feminist intersectional framework. And what's really important there is not only thinking, not throwing out the entire understanding of human rights, but adding context to the liberal and European kind of colonial conception of human rights, which has been weaponized against the oppressed throughout the region, and taking that understanding that human rights are an arena of struggle. And when it's grounded and informed by the needs and aspirations of the oppressed, that they can be a way and a strategy for decolonization, radical social change. And so thinking about that, we kind of enter the Black Alliance for Peace, we enter the region and through the context of Haiti, because we understand that Haiti has been a crucial point for Pan-African liberation and anti-colonial struggle since 1791, in the initial revolt against slavery, through the aiding of Simón Bolívar and through the aiding of other revolutionaries throughout the hemisphere. Haiti has also been demonized throughout the region as a way to kind of stifle anti-colonial and anti-slavery revolts throughout the region, particularly when we think of Cuba and sort of the way that Cuba's revolutions in the past were racialized for fear of another Haiti, as well as in the US. So we understand that Haiti has a critical historical role in the region, but it's not just about history, right? We also understand that Haiti is critical to the transformation of the Americas as part of a global and anti-colonial revolutionary project, and the revolutionary Pan-African movement. And so Haiti is our entry point, and we've been doing work as a Haiti Americas team, as a committee, and then a team since the beginning of 2001, and know that it's critical for Black liberation as well as the liberation of people through a Black working class struggle. And that's just as true now as it was, in the past, as it was under, French colonialism, under US military occupation, under the Duvalier dictatorship, and now currently under, UN occupation. And so what that kind of allows us to focus on in Haiti is both solidarity with Haiti and throughout the broader Caribbean. As I mentioned earlier, we sort of called for AMLO to reconsider the position in support of the UN mandate in Haiti, as well as just kind of calling for other regional formations, CARICOM and others who sort of look to Haiti and the violence that is happening right now in Haiti, which coincidentally, seems to increase every time another UN mandate is awarded there. We understand that in the region, and thinking about Haiti, that it is critical. It's a critical place of imperial exploitation. It's a critical way for the U.S. to bring in other partners, from France, from England, the UN, as well as in the broader region, under sort of under this imperialist logic, right, and under this imperialist project. So we really have to be careful and understand that while the Monroe Doctrine is changing, the U.S. has no goal, has no idea of letting that go. And if we ignore Haiti, and if we don't understand that Haiti is critical to the region, we run the risk of allowing that. And so what do we say beyond, support for Haiti, and what do we say beyond the support for solidarity in the region? We at the Black Alliance for Peace are calling for a zone of peace in the region. And that may sound familiar to some of you all who are familiar with CELAC, because CELAC called for sort of a governmental zone of peace in a sort of a government level zone of peace with progressive forces in 2014, as a way to, as a way to understand the the need for anti-imperialism in the region and to fight against what Carlos mentioned of this project of the U.S. imperialist project, right? And so what we are calling for, though, is not a zone of peace only looking at the pink tide, only looking at progressive governmental forces, but understanding from the bottom up, right? Understanding the civil society zone of peace, and understand that we, as organizations here in the region, as civil society organizations, as people that want to be in solidarity with folks in the region, that we have to struggle for peace, in alternative structures as well, right? And that means fighting against nuclear proliferation, fighting against arms sales in the region, and fighting against, all the intrusive actions of Southcom and other structures. And so the call for a zone of peace is a call for peoples and nations of the Caribbean and Latin America to resist. We understand that people want peace, and we understand that a zone of peace means ending foreign military presence and bases in the Caribbean throughout the region, as well as in all structures and practices of regional militarization. So through BAP, we intend to build a region-wide coalition to push warmongers out of the region. And we have to understand that this zone of peace is critical. And when we talk about peace, we know that by the Black radical peace tradition, peace is not the absence of conflict, but the achievement by popular struggle and defense of a world liberated from nuclear armaments and proliferation, unjust war, and global white supremacy. We understand that this must come from the bottom up, and we encourage it to be supported by progressive forces in the region that do have power and are able to be in solidarity with the peoples and have that focus on mass movement, whether it's here in the US, whether it's in Nicaragua, in Colombia. We have to understand, in Cuba, we have to understand that all of it comes back to the people. It needs to be informed by the needs and desires and the ability of people to struggle in the region.
I'm Michael Hudson. I'm appearing here for the International Manifesto Group. If you like this video and ones like it, please subscribe. For more information, go to the address on the screen.